making a decision to buy a house first instead of actually investing in cryptocurrencies, making your own business, or investing in the stock market is probably my biggest struggles ever since I moved into working societies. And the reason of that is mainly because I reside in a country named UK, which is probably the most expensive place to live in to begin with. And if you actually Google around, you will find out that the resident in the UK are actually spending averagely on 26% of their income every month just to actually have a place over their head. And the argument generally is that if you actually live up in the north, you would actually spend a little bit lesser than that. If you actually live down in the south, which is around London, then the prices actually will rise up tremendously. But in overall, I think the report of that is generally the median of people spending in the UK is actually a quarter of their salaries, which is 25%, up to 30% averagely on that, which is quite a lot basically. I also understood that I think my viewer is probably not from the UK, but in this video I'm going to talk about my experience and my thoughts around it, why I think buying a house is still a better choice regardless where you are at the moment, and how it actually affects my kind of long-term appreciation and investment over time as well. Obviously, there are always arguments that if you actually ended up investing in cryptocurrency earlier stage, you will actually become a millionaire now. But my place is that I've actually lived through that era, which is the Bitcoin and Ethereum eras, where it was back in $100 and all that. But back then, I didn't actually thought of buying it. Till now, I don't have the thought to buy it. I might miss out a lot of money, but at the end of the day, right, what I'm trying to say is that if you don't have that thought to buy that in the beginning, and you only thought of buying that after that you saw that there is a rise in the price and things like that, then you're probably not going to buy it now anyway. So that's my opinion. So there are 4 reasons I'm going to share why I think getting a house first is probably the most beneficial things to do, especially for middle-aged people like me. And the first one will be rent versus buy. There are loads of arguments on the internet, right, that basically doing some comparison between rent versus buy. And they even have formula if you Google around that, how you going to spend rent this month versus the down payment of capital going to buy a house, and then you work out the formula, and then they will give you how many years you have to break even of the amount you spend in buying that house. And I think there's some truth around it, right? Definitely. And one of the truths around that is if you actually going to spend less than 2 years of your time staying in that area where you're going to rent a house, then obviously I think renting is the right choice to do. But for me back then is that I kind of know that I'm going to stay here for the next 3 years to 5 years, and renting just isn't kind of make sense for me. The biggest reason of that is I have to spend £1,500 per month just for a 2-bedroom house, no utility bills, not including utility bills, no including council. I have to pay my council tax, and I have to buy my furniture and things like that. That's literally same as kind of buying a first house, and there's no difference. And now I've got my house, and my monthly payment is only like 900 quid, which is a lot cheaper than a 2-bedroom house where I'm also owning a 4-bedroom house as well, which is a massive difference here. Obviously, I think I understood that the argument is that you would have to have a chunk of money to do the down payment, which I'm not going to discuss about how I got that large chunk of capital to buy a house, where I can make another video to talk about it. But this video I just want to address the case that, especially in this section of videos, is that I think that buy is always better than rent if you're actually staying more than 3 years. And most importantly, I think if you actually living in an expensive area like the UK, if I would take away that 25% in the next 10 years or 20 years of price of renting but owning a house, then I felt like I think it is actually worth. And then the next bit is actually quite tied to the first reason of what we just discussed, which is forcing saving mechanisms. And I generally don't trust myself, right, when it comes to saving money. I have a compulsive way of spending money, especially on V-Bucks, buying Fortnite's anime skins, because I think that that's longer appreciations than any other things, right? But I think on the hindsight, people would think that is also stupid ideas of this, what I just mentioned, because you wouldn't want to spend 30 years of committing to a 30 years of mortgage just to force yourself to save a little bit of money. Which my argument is that you do have 30 years of mortgage, but you don't actually have 30 years of mortgage. What am I actually talking about? But anyway, What I'm trying to say is that there's a term called remortgage, and when you first started your mortgage, you want to drag as long as possible so you can save a little bit of cash. But obviously, you don't spend the next 30 years paying that kind of large chunk of interest of money into that 30 years, because majority of them is actually interest. Instead, you would actually do a thing called remortgage, where you actually put more money into your mortgage, you shorten down the length of your mortgage, and eventually you actually can save your interest over time. Plus, I also think that even my neighbors, I just recently found out, is that they actually just paying interest only mortgage because they felt that it's a lot cheaper to maintain the house, and it's also same as renting the house, but they own the house co together with the bank. And this is the gray area where I think that that's a stupid idea to do, because if you're doing interest only, then you generally just giving the interest. The bank is basically your landlord. Having paying interest part plus repayment, you would actually able to reclaim the house eventually. But again, I think there's a lot of people thinking this is a stupid idea to buy a house. I have tons of friends that do not actually want to buy a house and just want to rent it, and don't want to compare the situations, but currently my situations, I think, is always more comfortable to have your own house. You always have a place that you can call home, and that is the most important thing, I think, for myself, which is pretty important. And I also know that having this forced saving mechanism, I can actually notice that every month the money comes in my bank, and other than 25% of my income going into the bank, and then a little bit of that actually pays into my own investment, which is a long-term appreciation investment that will grow over time. And then I know that this is something that belongs to myself, which is a point that is quite important. The next bit is stable investment, which I also think that it's kind of self-explanatory, right? Property is always a stable investment comparing to any other investment in the market. And again, there's lots of people disagree with that, and I feel like whenever there's inflations going on, just like what happened in the UK almost a year ago, right? We had a 10% inflation, but at the same time, the house is actually growing in tandem as well, which is, I think, it's always happened that way. And especially myself, I bought my house 4 years ago. It was £300,000, and then I think about 2 or 3 years later, it's £400,000, and now I didn't even actually evaluate it, but I think it's actually rising significantly a lot more than it used to be, which is, I think, again, people think about it, it doesn't really mean a lot, because that's your main resident, which is my resident, and money, that never doesn't mean anything if you just stay in and you're not selling it. But in that case, you still know that your house worth something than a stock market that you can't leverage and things like that. There are people who solely depends on rental properties. Generally, they just buy loads of house multi-occupancies. I think HMOs a year ago in the UK is that when the inflation actually rise, the interest rate actually risen as well, right? Which is, that affects a lot of landlords that depends on, basically sits on interest only, because when that base interest rate actually goes up with the interest rate, where I think a lot of people start to panic selling the HMOs. And I did regret that I didn't have cash at that time, but I do have the cash. I would have gotten quite a lot of good properties and I can rent it out. Comparing to any other business, yes, it's not as lucrative. I do think that if you have access to cash or self-stays and things like that, property is the first thing to go with. That's my opinion. And lastly is emotional security. Emotional security is something that depends on people, right? I think I'm from a kind of Asian family, traditional Asian family basically, and our priority is always to get a house first than anything else. So my parents actually work very hard. So that mindset obviously kind of affects me as well when I'm here, and even when I'm in the UK. And the people back then when I arrived in the UK, not a lot of people actually thinking to become landlord. They would just want to rent, and then wouldn't want a thing that ties their life, like what I mentioned, 30 years of mortgage. They want to be free, and they want to kind of go around the world and travel, things like that. So this is a little bit of mindset difference here. I think generally I still gears towards that. When I bought my first house, which is the one I'm filming right now, I just felt like a sense of achievement and in a place that I can find and actually call a home. Plus, the newer generation that I met recently, but they don't really care about housing that much anymore, because generally they came from a newer generation. I think a generation before them already spent most of their life to to getting the house and thingy. So, conclusion to all of this, I think I'm just average people with average salary. I think the things I just mentioned just now, just talk about just now, probably doesn't apply to you. But for me, I just felt like that there are tons of people that's spending a lot of time actually thinking how to make how to make even more money, to actually in the end just realize they just want a home or a house and things. At least that's my observation, right? But I don't think I have the capabilities to kind of become next Zuckerbergs and have billionaires and things like that. So I can only try to be safe a little bit. So I invested in the house first. So now I have a home. I can take more risk now. Because of that, I'm now able to start a YouTube channel again, more mentally suitable to start a YouTube channel and starting a side business, things like that. So that's basically it. That's basically the thing I want to share. And hopefully this video I'm able to sync up with people who actually have the same thoughts, but I'll put more detailed descriptions in the YouTube description so that you know actually what I'm trying to talk about. If you're actually in the same interest and same journey as me, why not just leave a comments down below. And at the same time, I also realize this is probably my 10th video of upload. I found out loads of people be viewing my videos but not subscribed. If you think this video actually helped you, please subscribe. And obviously, if anything topics you want to talk about or view about or know about, you can leave comments down below as usual. And I'll definitely make probably a video that share my experience if that relates to me, and hopefully that video is able to help you in the longer run. So that's it. I'll see you next time.